President Cyril Ramaphosa issuing a statement congratulating Zimbabwean President Emmerson Mnangagwa. He says, "I congratulate President Emmerson Mnangagwa on his re-election. I wish him and the people of Zimbabwe well for the upcoming term." And this is despite the polling results being rejected by opposition parties, with calls for it to be challenged in court. Zimbabwe's main opposition party, Citizens for Coalition for Change, rejecting the results of the weekend poll. They're not the only ones. Analysts and even neighboring countries have questioned the outcome. Mnangagwa claims to win by 52.6% for a second term in office. SADC observers have criticized what they say is cases of voter intimidation. The EU observers say that voting took place under a climate of fear, and even the UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres also questioning the climate under which elections and polls were taking place. Rejoice Ngwenya is a political analyst in Harare, joins me at the same time. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa seemingly being an outlier to many of the questions that have been asked about Zimbabwe's presidential election. Your thoughts on the South African president congratulating Emmerson Mnangagwa on his re-election? Rejoice, good morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Lester. I mean, this should be really shocking, unless if South Africa is not a member of the SADC, because to the best of my knowledge, Lester, when SADC is observing elections, they are doing it on behalf of their principals, and South Africa being part of them. Now, this sort of hypocrisy is the one that has left Zimbabwe in a permanent state of, economic malaise, because I do not understand if SADC has condemned these elections. I don't know who's on his behalf South Africa is talking about. It's really shocking, and this is going to have huge repercussions on South Africa and the region.
Rejoice, if Nelson Chamisa, the president of Citizens for Coalitions for Change, had before the election questioned whether this poll would be free and fair, that operations would run smoothly, and whether people would be able to vote freely. Why then did he still contest elections?
Look, I mean, in a democracy, really, one of the most important things is to exercise your right to vote. Now, Nelson Chamisa represents Zimbabwe, the Zimbabwean electorate, and the electorate has a right to participate in elections. Even if the election is flawed, there is a theory, a narrative that it is better to participate in a faulty election and expose the dictatorship for what it is worth than staying back. Because if you stay out of an election, Lester, it's going to take you 5 years to recover and recoup. So it is always important to be there in parliament. Even if Nelson Chamisa is not in government, he has got about 80 members of parliament representing the voice of Zimbabweans. Never mind, talk about the number of councillors spread all over the country. So it is imperative, Lester, that Zimbabwean, the alternative voice, be represented in parliament. We can deal with the politics later.
What now? To the courts to contest election results? Courts that have largely lent in the direction of Zanu-PF, Rejoice?
Lester, that's another issue again. Somebody might argue and say, why even think about litigation? Because the court system justice system is captured, is poisoned. And I still keep going back to the Constitution, Lester. Our Constitution says, if you are aggrieved and you have been contesting in an election, go to the courts, go and prove your case to the court legally. There's a constitutional right to do that. And of course, politically speaking, there must also be an opportunity for him to apply pressure using the critical leverage of SADC so that the will of the people is once again not abused.
Emmerson Mnangagwa, in a statement after election results, said and handed and reached across the aisle and said, "I'm extending an olive branch. Come work with me. Let's have cooperation across party lines so that we can rebuild a Zimbabwean economy and we can rebuild a Zimbabwean society." Is there any sincerity in that seemingly extending of this olive branch to Nelson Chamisa from Emmerson Mnangagwa?
The shortest answer to that list is no. Look, you don't accept benevolence from from somebody who has proved that they are not a man of integrity. The build up to the election was fraught with violence, with state capture, with all sorts of shenanigans. So the best thing that Nelson Chamisa can do is he has to prove first that this election was fraudulent. Then he can bargain from a position of strength. We've been down that route before, the GNU in 2008. What Mnangagwa wants is to dominate the political landscape, and I'm sure that Triple C is not going to accept that. Let Chamisa first of all prove that this election was fraudulent. Then he can be in a better position of bargaining and better position of strength.
Rejoice, on this side of Bytebridge, I've obviously monitoring social media, reading reports. A Zimbabwean expat community in South Africa seemingly not happy with the current status quo of politics in Zimbabwe, and that economic situation has led them to seeking work opportunities in South Africa. But at the same time, there is a quarter string from South Africans that says, well, if you had felt as passionately about a political status quo in Zimbabwe, then the 700,000 Zimbabweans, 700,000 is what the Zimbabwe National Statistics Agency claims, 700,000 Zimbabweans working in South Africa, you probably should have returned home and to vote. And I understand it is very expensive to travel, for example, from the very furthest corner from Zimbabwe, Cape Town, all the way to Zimbabwe. But would 700,000 Zimbabweans estimate? Well, that is the figure given by Zimstats. Would that have made any difference in this poll?
Well, to be honest, to be fair, Lester, I mean, the reason why we should have a change of government is that this simple legislative instrument that forces Zimbabweans to travel to come and vote is totally unacceptable. It's unconstitutional. Zimbabweans should be allowed to vote from wherever they are in the world. And I can tell you, now, I think the Zimbabwean community in South Africa is doing enough to sustain this economy. So asking them to get into buses, into planes to come and vote in Zimbabwe is asking for too much. Whatever they are doing to support the democratic movement by sustaining the economy in Zimbabwe is perfect enough. What we should be arguing for as SADC and as Zimbabwe is to have Zimbabweans all over the world to vote. That is what is happening in every civilization, and we are not going to give Mnangagwa and Zanu-PF the benefit of the doubt. It is not a privilege for Zimbabweans in South Africa to vote. It's the right. So this is what SADC should be arguing about, that it is important for citizens from wherever they are, whether in the Arctic Circle or in Kazakhstan, to come to vote wherever they are. So Zimbabweans in South Africa must stay and work in Zimbabwe and work and support the democratic movement in Zimbabwe. But we have to argue for them to vote from wherever they are in South Africa.
Rejoice Ngwenya, really appreciate your time, political analyst in Harare in Zimbabwe.